There are no moving slides in this particular presentation, just some narration as an introduction to the book. In part one of this book, Rommelt differentiates good and bad strategy for us. His work is filled with interesting real examples from countries, companies, and institutions around the world. Perhaps one of the most important paragraphs appears in the introduction on page 2 of the hard copy book. In the second paragraph, he states, "Despite the voices wanting to equate strategy with ambition, leadership, vision, planning, or the economic logic of competition, strategy is none of these. The core of strategy work is always the same: discovering the critical factors in a situation and designing a way of coordinating and focusing actions to deal with those factors." This is probably why Michael Porter's work is so well received by the business community. Michael Porter systematically conveys Rommelt's comments here. Arguably, we could state that the critical factors are the 5 forces, and the coordinating and focusing of actions reflect the idea of Porter's value chain. Rommelt's valuable commentary on this perspective is expressed in the particulars of bad strategy in contrast to good strategy. As he states later on page 7, the purpose of this book is to wake you up to the dramatic differences between good strategy and bad strategy, and to give you a leg up toward crafting good strategies. He introduces part 1 by stating that a good strategy just doesn't draw on existing strengths. It creates strength through the coherence of its design. Thus, we have another way to describe and think about competitive advantage. The story of Steve Jobs turning Apple around is fascinating, not because it was new or complicated, but because Jobs focused on the fundamentals, or as Rommelt puts it, Jobs employed Business 101 concepts. He concludes Chapter 1 by stating that strategy is at least as much about what an organization does not do as it is about what it does. You will find a similar principle shared in the books Good to Great and Great by Choice, authored by Jim Collins. In Chapter 2, we come to learn that Walmart's advantage came to pass because Sam Walton redefined the idea of a store. The integrated network became the operating unit of the company, not the individual store. This is similar to the idea that McDonald's is not in the hamburger business, but in the real estate business. The provocative ideas continue with a military example and the conclusion that competitive advantage can be gained by imposing asymmetric costs on an opponent. Chapter 3 opens the discussion of bad strategy and emphasizes that it is not just the absence of good strategy, but the process of simply doing the wrong thing and calling it strategy. Think back to Charles Schultz's comments about growth with regard to Starbucks. Think about your own experience in organizations. Can you identify comments and talks by your organization's leaders that can be characterized as bad strategy? In Chapter 4, Rommelt identifies template-style strategy as a problem. This course is very much structured with that idea in mind, and that is to avoid the template-style approach to strategy. You've been given a number of excellent books to read on the topic. In contrast, a traditional strategy textbook will promote templates. One of my favorite parts of this chapter is where Rommelt cites specific visions or missions beginning on page 68. He calls the Department of Defense mission a waste of print. Although the mission is agreeable, it does not serve a particular purpose in its own right. Cornell University's mission indicates that Cornell University is a university. I'm not sure we can get much more caustic than Rommelt stating that it is embarrassing for an intelligent adult to be associated with this sort of bloviating. I must confess that I had to look up the word bloviating since I do not recall it from recent memory. Suffice it to state that it is not a compliment. He concludes the Cal State Sacramento discussion by saying that the increased monies gained from a lower dropout rate will be used to raise faculty salaries and build a new library. Again, not very flattering to that organization. In regard to the CIA, he questions the need to publish a vision at all, given the nature of the agency. Finally, he states that Net Corporation simply cannot do what it aspires to. Again, bad strategy is not just the absence of good strategy. Bad strategy is an entity in its own right that drives the organization in the wrong direction. Chapter 5 outlines some key components of good strategy. It's remarkable that they align well with Michael Porter's work, even though they are expressed in different terms. Rommelt's work serves to add various dimensions to our thinking about these fundamental ideas.